Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Body broadcast with Austin and Marty. And today we are going to do our monthly or periodic Q&A. So we've been doing these about once a month, give or take. And we have some really good questions today on both Instagram and Facebook. And we are going to dig into them.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped for them. As always, we kind of grab the questions the day or two before. We haven't really looked at them, so we get kind of off-the-cuff answers that aren't scripted, coming right towards your audio sensory audios ears. Okay, I'm gonna let you talk. I'm gonna let you talk because I'm out of it. Go for it.
I'm gonna jump over to the Facebook thread I have. Our first question is about ankle mobility. Recommendations on exercises for ankle mobility. Okay, so
sure, go for it.
Oh, all right, cool. So that's an interesting one. I noticed with ankle mobility that can actually have a lot of downstream, or I guess it would be upstream effects since the ankle's at the bottom, with like squats and knee pain and hip pain and things like that, just because the ankle doesn't flex, whether it's like dorsiflexion or depending on, or your calf is tight or whatever. So it can definitely have some problems there. And a lot of people will use like the wedges or like the squat wedges and the
shoes.
There's also, the shoes. I just wedges, whatever. And then there's actually a thing now. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called the squat wedge. It's like a little ramp that you put your heels on.
Oh, yes, I have seen that. Yeah, I have.
So it's just a fancier way instead of putting 10-pound plates under your heels. It's just a little bit more sophisticated than that. But as far as mobility goes, I guess, really one of the things I probably see most is just tight calves, to be honest.
Yes.
Yeah, because when you're diving into a squat, for example, I'll use the squat because that's the easiest example.
Sure.
And your knee, and your knee's traveling forward a little bit, and the angle between your foot and your shin is going to go past a 90 degree. And it should be able to. Well, and some people, they can't get past that 90 degree, and that's where they're going to have problems. Like their heel's going to start lifting, or, there's something funky is going to happen with their knees or their hips. So normally in that case, it's just a matter of tight calves. It's easy to see too, if you can just look at yourself doing a calf raise. Like if you can't really sink your heel down on a calf raise in the stretch portion, then your calves are probably too tight. So, and I see that all the time. It's like you really short range motion, but the calf raises are honestly not a bad way to work on that. You can just exaggerate that stretch portion because it's a loaded stretch. So that helps, it's weight loaded stretch. You can do like a static stretch after your calves are done. You can do static stretches, you can really do them whenever, I suppose. But main thing there, and we've talked about stretching before, is that you want to do it for long enough period. Right. It's not like so you don't want to just sink down in a nice stretch for 10 seconds. You want to leave it there 45, 60 seconds where it's actually going to have some elongating effect. Yep. So you can do that. Foam rolling. You can do, sometimes it can even be like plantar fasciitis. Some people have some issues with that. So, those are the main things I see. And it can be, you might look upstream a little bit as well. You got your Achilles, your tendon, attaches in the back. So you got to look at that whole posterior chain. Sometimes people just really are tight in that whole posterior chain, like their calves are tight, their hamstrings are tight, their glutes are tight, and they can't, those people that they can only bend down and like touch their kneecap.
Right.
So,
yeah,
it may just be a matter of like posterior chain stretching. And if you still have issues, there's a lot of mobility specialists that are going to help you with that stuff. It could just be something in your movement pattern too. But again, the tight calves are probably the main one that I see.
Yep. No, that's awesome. So I'll give a little tiny bit of a different angle on it here because I have some pretty good personal experience with that stuff. My left my almost entire left side got like, it's like my left side was in a car accident and my right side was not. So very, very wild. So in other words, like I've got my left back and shoulder problems. I got my left hip problems and my left knee and my left ankle problems. So I can kind of speak a little bit on this. And so kind of what I did and what I still do is, it's like diagnosing, right? Like it's asking yourself more questions in terms of like, why do you need the mobility in the ankles, or is it in the ankle? Because that could be directly affecting what you're talking about too. Because for me, my right has been, we'll say, fine. Like I don't have any hip rounding problems with sinking too low on my right hand side, but now my left hand side, I'll get like the butt wink on when I squat. So like preferably like those, I have I think they're called the Nike Romanales 2 shoe, which is like the little bit of the heel wedge in them too. Like, yeah, you can use that squat wedge as well. It's like, this is again just talking purely about the squat here, but for ankle stuff too is I had some problems with the front part of my shin bones, like as in where my talus was interacting with my with my tibia and my fibula. So I would have almost like a binding there. It was just felt like it was just stuck. There wasn't really any pain. But so what I would do is not only like Austin said, kind of work and find out where those on the, like, especially for me, it was the seated calf raise was where I felt it the most. So I kind of, I'm kind of ask you like, when do you feel that you have the lack of mobility? So I would do not a more stretching on the left hand side, but I would load up like a plate or two on the seated calf raise. And I would kind of sit there and I would like my right one would have no tension in it because it was fine. My left one would be like tight because that was obviously where my issues were in the front of my ankle there, and just kind of relax in that stretch with weight on both the sides until the left side would relax until the point of my right one as well. So I did foam rolling. That wasn't my issue. It wasn't actually directly related to the front, like as in my tibialis anterior, the muscle in the front of my shin, where people will claim to get a lot of shin splints. That wasn't my issue. It was actually the bone structure. So I would say, have you seen a chiropractor about this, especially if it's in one side versus the other, or if it's just both? And then so kind of going from there, and I would have my talus bone adjusted a couple times there I was training a chiropractor at the time, and he helped me out with that. And so whenever he would, we would kind of do at the end of my training sessions, I'd have him at the last session of the night, and he would go in and he would adjust it for me, and he'd go, okay, come out, and we'd go on to the seated calf raise, and then it would be awesome. It actually would not have the tightness at all in the back of my left calf until like, and then of course like wandering around or whatever, because I actually ended up having like a left bum hip, like as it was just out of place. So that's also one of the reasons why I'm asking, why do you need the flexibility or the mobility? Is like, and then like you said, you can go upstream and find out where it was. So my hip was putting out my talus bone. So like, I know this is way outside of like the scope of the podcast, and I probably just confused a whole bunch of people, including myself, but it's diagnosing where that problem is actually coming from. But if you're straight up going off of just both sides, like as in you just don't feel you have either that ankle flexibility to be able to sink into something like the squat, or you find during a leg press, you're coming down with the leg press and you're finding that like your heels are lifting off too much no matter what you do, or you're getting lower back rounding too fast, and you really do flat out believe it's the ankle mobility and the ankle flexibility, it's troubleshooting. Like almost like everything is here. It's a lot of troubleshooting, right? And so even for myself now, I know those kind of procedures for myself, but appealing to authority on that is always going to be an awesome idea. Like as in, we can tell you the stuff that we just did, but like Austin said, finding someone that's competent in your area, that is not necessarily a physiotherapist, but finding out, like it could be a chiropractor, it could be just a massage. Like maybe you've got a golf ball knot in the side of your soleus or your gastrocnemius, one of your calf muscles, and you get that massaged out, and now your ankle flexibility is great on both sides. Maybe they're both tight. Though the last example I'll give for myself personally is that from grade 7 to grade 8, I grew a foot over the course of the summer. And this is from July and August. So like I went from pretty much 5'1" to 6'1". I went from being the power guard, or like not the point guard, but like the power position in basketball to playing center, because I grew. So I had to relearn how to shoot basketball. Everything I was shooting from like the lower position, I had to learn how to shoot above my head. Like it was wild. And I went from being actually pretty damn good at basketball to just shit. So it just wasn't my sport anymore at all, which was, hilarious and unfortunate. But where I'm going with this is that I had such incredibly painful growing pains in my calves, especially during that time. And I it's not that I can guarantee you, but something definitely would have occurred in my calves at that time to have caused that. What do you call that distress and potentially have pulled my ankles out, because I'm all legs. Like my femurs, I think are like something like 38. I'm a 38 inseam. And I know I'm just shy of 6'1", so that's a huge inseam for like most people. Like their pants would be like a 32 or a 34. I'm usually in dress pants. I have to be a 38, so that can also affect it too. And then the last thing I'll say about the ankle or the hip, sorry, not the hip, the ankle or flexibility or mobility is: are you too damn tall or too damn long in the legs like me? So like, as in like, for me to sink down, like squatting is not my best exercise. Like, cause I look like I have to basically stick my hips out, hinge all the way down. It looks like a big mechanical lever that builds buildings, coming all the way down. So if I do use them, I'll put them at the end so that I'm not putting that much stress on the ankle or the flex, or not having to cause the flexibility issues. So that's something you can kind of warp and look around there too. Man, did I ever ramble on that one? But that's my final answer. I hope that gets me the $1 million.
I like what you mentioned about just finding the origin. That's the biggest thing. We can sit here and tell you to stretch your ankles and do some funky lunge stretch against a wall, sideways, upside down. But it's like that, if the problem's upstream somewhere, then that's not going to help. So you got to be able to figure out where it originates.
Well, yeah, it's a troubleshoot, and it's just because either you're feeling it, and it's like, how many times have you heard? And I can already know the answer. How many times have you heard? I hurt my shoulder, or my shoulder's sore, or something like that, like all the time, right? And then you go in, and then they're doing a shoulder press, and their shoulder feels fine. Well, it's not your damn shoulder; it's something else. It's either. It's like, I know they could be potentially referring to the rotator cuff or something, but that whole type of massage, like called either trigger point therapy or myofascial release therapy, it's called referral pain. Like, as in, you might be feeling it in your ankle, but it's really coming from your vastus lateralis. Like, that's tight, therefore affecting it, tugging on your ankle. The analogy that I was kind of came up with, so here's already, we're going to get from Marty's mouth out really quick here, was your muscles are effectively, of course, attached to 2 points, like as in, like if let's say your quad, I'll go with the vastus lateralis, it's attached at your knee and it's attached at your hip. So and it's like a rope attached at the 2 walls. Like, let's say I'm holding on to one end of the rope and the wall is my knee, and so on my hip, and if you get a knot in that muscle, like that, you have the same length of muscle. Each muscle strand or muscle fiber has the same length. But if we take it and we put a knot in that, we rope it around and pull it back, and now it's my hip hasn't moved, my knee hasn't moved, but so now effectively I'm going to feel either a tug at my hip or I'm going to feel a tug at my knee. But now where's the problem is that knot, and the knot is going to be somewhere on that muscle strand. It's not going to be necessarily at the knee or necessarily at the hip. So finding where that knot is and either massaging it out, you'll see people like lie on lacrosse balls or tennis balls to like kind of release the stress, which is effectively untying the knot. But that's referral pain. Like, so like if you find that knot, we'll say in your quad there, and you push down on it and you start feeling that pain in your knee, well, exactly, you're not doing anything to the knee. That's not the knee's fault, we'll say. That's the fault of that knot in the quad. So going back to the ankle, like if you feel that you don't have that flexibility there, you're not able to go down, or you're like me and your hip rounds, but you push on one of the muscles in your calf, it's relaxed, and you push on it, you feel like a dull pain or whatever in your ankle. Because I don't think they mentioned that they had ankle pain. They're just wondering about mobility and flexibility. But like if you push on that knot in your calf and you feel that tightness, or you feel your calf, your ankle lock up, there you go. Like that's the way to troubleshoot. And I don't think there's enough info about that out there, and I hope that really kind of helps, like with the analogy of the knot there.
Yeah, that was good. That should answer it. The question was just about recommendations for ankle mobility. Yeah, so it didn't specify.
Sure.
But let's roll into the next one.
Yeah, ma'am.
What is your thought process when programming training as far as exercise selection and order? So I guess they say for clients or for yourself, but I suppose the question would be, what factors are we taking into consideration when we decide the order of or exercise selection? So
sure. I just talked way too much, so you go for it on this one.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so well, with the exercise selection, we can kind of piggyback off that first question. in that something that fits the person. Well, actually, that wasn't one of our questions. That's something we talked about pre-show about biomechanics of that person. What fits the person structurally in terms of how they're built, that can determine the exercises they're doing. They can also, obviously, what they need to do, what muscle groups they need to bring up, what's weak. And you know what? I find more often than not that if something that they're really, really bad at is probably something that they need to do, at least some.
Absolutely.
For the most part. Now, that's not something that's going to potentially injure them, that they're just so, if they have a really funky structure that they just, biomechanically, they just can't go through that range of motion very well. There's nothing that you have to do. We know that. We know there's no exercise that you must do. But typically, if something's extremely weak, then there's a muscular imbalance there, and simply avoiding the exercise altogether is just going to, create further imbalance normally. It's just going to continue to get worse. So it's not a terrible idea to look at it in that sense. That's, again, so look at what needs improved, and that's going to help you determine, what exercises you need to do. And another thing, I'll put a spin on that too, is also like nervous system. So when I'm looking at programming, if this is diving into programming a little bit more, but I will also look into recovery ability and think, all right, what's their recovery capacity like in terms of their nervous system? If I give them all compound exercises all the time with very little single joint movements, is it just going to wreck them? Are they going to be at risk for getting hurt because they're just fatigued and their nervous system's shot? So I will look at those kind of secondary variables like that. That's not necessarily related to their biomechanics or anything. That's just related to their recovery, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. They think about, an exercise being superior in terms of like recruiting muscle fibers. So an example is like a free weight exercise versus a machine. Well, it might be superior at recruiting muscle fibers because you have to stabilize the weight. But at the same time, there's people that just, if they do tons of deadlifts and tons of squats and stuff, it just toasts them. Their CNS is just done, and they can't perform anything else worth, optimally. So I will consider, like when I'm looking at exercise selection or even the order of exercises, I might not, if they're doing like a higher volume program, I'm probably not going to have them just completely waste themselves like right out of the gate. Because I mean, if I have them do a bunch of failure sets on a deadlift and then everything else just sucks in the workout, there's no mind muscle connection. They can't get anything to fire. That's senseless. There's nothing, it kind of defeats the purpose. So those are some things that we could look at. I mean, there's really a lot of things we could look at, but those are some kind of secondary things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that too. So I agree, of course. Usually, of course. So, I want to find something that me and you really damn disagree on and just like duke it out. And before I know it, there's F-bombs. We have to cancel the show entirely. We're going to have to fly to each other and hug it out, something like that. But, I'm just waiting for it. Anyways, yeah, I completely agree with that. And then so for because you went really hard into the selection, which I don't think I even have much more to add about that, especially because you covered the nervous system, you covered like recruitment, movement patterns. But so then for order and programming, kind of the second half of that is you're told, and what I mean told is if you read enough of the general information or like not so much textbook stuff, but if you look at classic, what they even teach you in personal training courses or everything like that, is they'll usually say something along the lines of start out with your compound exercises and work into your isolation exercises. And that is fine and dandy, and just like everything that I've been coming to learn in the last 18, 19 years of doing this, not only for myself training, but for also coaching clients, is it depends. Right. The best example I'll give of this would be when I was coaching with John Meadows, was his style at the time of chest training was just not for me. And this is one of the reasons why John is such a damn awesome person and coach, because I told him this, and he said, okay, what do you feel? And this is years ago. This would be 8-9 years ago at least. John was still working at the bank. I love saying that just because it's so funny that John was a banker. Like, I just picture that mutant in like this huge banking suit. Like, how can I help you today with my? I just love it, right? Anyways, and he said, what do you feel? And I said, well, one arm pec decks, or like pec fly machine. And he was like, okay, at the beginning of every single chest day, you are doing 3 to 5 sets of 15 reps each arm, and that was single-handedly the only thing that actually caused me to not only start feeling my chest in subsequent exercises, but it showed me that that pre-exhaust wasn't what it is touted to be, in a sense of, you don't need to pre-exhaust your quads before you go into squats, because then it will work your hamstrings and your glutes stronger. I'm not trying to say that, but what I'm saying is that if and when I started on, let's say, incline bench press, versus doing the one arm pec decks first, is that either my shoulders would take over, my triceps would take over, or I just wouldn't feel the incline in my chest due to either the weight was like too high because I had so much power behind it, or it was just, like I was doing more of training the movement versus training the muscle. So I want to say, like, a disclaimer, of course, this is the Mind Body broadcast where we're talking more about like bodybuilding, building the body, as opposed to going for complete strength or anything like that, right? So we're obviously interested in the size and the shape of the muscle, recruitment of the muscle in that sense, in terms of we're looking at targeting the obviously the desired muscle. If we want to build the chest, we want to train the chest and not always just the shoulders anyway. So when I did those one arm pec decks, like, then I started feeling them, and then that got stronger. And I'll tell you, without me even knowing at the time, then not only being able to do less weight, of course, because I was did in a sense pre-exhaust, my chest was a little bit more tired, but lowering the weight on the incline, the next exercise, I was able to not only recruit it, because the chest was, we'll say, woken up, it was recruiting, it was able to fire, but using the less weight, and then the chest going, oh, okay, this is what I do. Because I'll tell you very firmly, and they don't talk about this enough, and this was just something that I had from my own meanderings inside the gym, is that they don't talk about like activation. They talk about mind to muscle connection and all this stuff. It's like, but if you don't know, in terms of like your brain or your body does not know what the muscle does, it's not going to just magically know it intuitively. Some people are super damn lucky, and they pick up a dumbbell and they do a curl and they feel it in nothing but the bicep. That's awesome. Like, I remember it being in like junior high, like grade 7, and like either girls would say to me or I would say to girls, like, hey, like in the gym, like in gym class, sorry, not in the gym, I wasn't in the gym at that time, like, flex your bicep. And so many people would be like, I don't know what you mean, or I don't know how. And because they had no idea how to bicep the bicep, you know what I mean? Like, they just didn't know how to contract it. So you have to learn that. Like, if you don't know that sensation, then you're going to have to put yourself in the most advantageous position to be able to feel that muscle. Dante Trudel talks a hell of a lot about that, especially, I remember he was talking about like using like constant tension on a cable curl and being able to use a little bit higher reps and things like that. So going back to do like the order and the programming, is that it really, once you are, and I don't want to say advanced, but once you're intermediate, or like you've tried something in the beginning, like you're like me, you did the bench press, you did the incline bench press, and you either felt it in your shoulders or you felt it in your triceps, or both, or they were the ones that even just grew, you didn't necessarily feel it there, then you are going to have to choose a better exercise selection. And that's either going to be by your own kind of documentation, your own research, your own experimentation, or it's going to be telling that to a coach, like I did with John. And so then John said, okay, and so for me, I was lucky enough to at least have known that the one arm pec deck was the one that I felt in the chest, so I could prioritize that movement. And that was, holy crap, did I do that forever? Like, so some people might have got bored with that, but I got so excited because finally I was starting to grow a chest. It was finally starting to take shape. I wasn't just this concave upper bodied fella, right? So so I take all of that stuff into consideration, especially when building a program for a client, and then like asking them, or asking yourself, if you're not working with a coach, is like, what do you feel? What do you enjoy? Because we've talked about that before in like just programming period, but exercise selection and order is that's just that's it. It has to be something if you're feeling that you're, because that's the whole goal of bodybuilding or building the body, we'll say. And kind of the last angle on that is if, let's say, you're doing like you hear the classic bro spit, something like chest and triceps, back and biceps, or something like that, and the prioritization has got to be there. Like if you've got a whoppingly huge chest and your biceps suck, I don't think putting chest before biceps is going to be advantageous for you at that time. Put the biceps before the chest, and then you can kind of do what I said there, is that find the bicep exercise that works the best for you, and then beat the living crap out of it. So therefore, you're getting the muscle stimulation, the muscle activation. You can recruit things like we talked about progressive resistance. You can go back and listen to the training podcast and training intensity podcast that we did, and there's how to properly, in my very firm opinion, order your exercise selection for sure.
So here's something I can add to that too, with do things you enjoy. That also, I can put a small spin on that too. Like I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, man, go for it.
The only trap that I see sometimes is people only do stuff they enjoy, never do anything that they aren't good at.
Right.
So it's like, you can't just rely on the things you enjoy just because, you're strong as heck on the deadlift. You're deadlifting all day and you're neglecting all the things you really suck at. You don't want to fall into that trap necessarily. It's just like people post their best sets online, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. But that's it. You summed it up so beautifully when you said like the things that you suck the most out of, or could more than likely be something that you should do. And for me, that was deadlifts, like conventional floor deadlifts. Like I not only sucked at them, but I didn't care for them either. So it was a double whammy in that regard. But when I did floor deadlifts, or when I do floor deadlifts, like that is some of the best stuff for growth stimulus in my traps and my spinal erectors possible. But like, so I have to know that, and so that would be the flip wiring on the going in and doing only the exercises you like. Well, it's like, it's one of those things is put up or shut up, or don't deal with it. But especially if you're a competitor and you're showing up at a show, and the constant feedback you get is your biceps are too small, but you're too arrogant or too thick-headed to change your bicep routine, well, then don't comment on it then. Like, sorry, keep showing up with crappy biceps. So yeah, I agree with you entirely on that one, is that, like, you can't do everything you enjoy, but you have to. But then again, let's give a little bit of a minor analogy about school. It's like when I was in university, I had to do electives. Like they made me take 2 classes, I think, in like arts. I forget what it was, but there was 4 different groups. So I was in science, was taking chemistry. But I did like a history class, I did a music class, I did an English class, and I didn't necessarily like them, but I had to do them to graduate university to get like because they have to call the elective. So like, let's say you're doing 2 bicep exercises you love and one that you don't really care for, but is going to give you substantial results. It's like, why the hell wouldn't you do it? Especially if that's your downfall in bodybuilding shows is your biceps. It's like, well, you got to do something different, and that's that. I'll finish off with that. Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. Like, come on, ladies and gentlemen. Like, it's just not going to happen if you don't change something.
Yeah. Straight from Marty's mouth.
Bam, baby. Bam.
Oh, okie dokie. So next one, it says, Austin and I have spoke about this before, but I'd like to hear what your role of mental imagery or thought process takes in your lives. What aspects or areas of your life do you use it in? How about things like using it before you train, big sets or posing routines, etc.? Okay. Good question.
Yep.
Yeah. You want to hit it first?
Sure thing. I've read substantially on this stuff. One of probably I would say the first bodybuilders to speak out on this were probably Frank Zane and Arnold. Like Frank Zane, if you've ever read any of his books, he has some books that are I like them. They're not necessarily dated, but like some of his training routines, whatever. But he was very much so into the mind, which is like that. He would probably be a cool person to talk to about the mind body broadcast type of thing, right? But the whole visualization, like he would even go so far as to have like certain music before Like his leg day would be this, but like it wasn't even music such as like a classic song like a rock and roll or whatever, but he would have like ambient music or certain things that he would study and that would activate certain brain waves. So he went so far into this stuff. And then of course Arnold would talk about the visualization things about like, you can visualize yourself doing biceps beforehand or visualize yourself. Like if your goal is to do a 405 bench or something, I know we're talking about bodybuilding, I'm just giving an example, but you like visualizing the 4 plates on the bar, bench pressing it, you doing it yourself and things like that beforehand. And there's no way that there isn't some validity to this. Like now, is it 100% like one of those things that you see with either business or you see with your life? Is that like if you believe it, you can do it or succeed with it or something? And for sure that there has to be it there. And so for other areas and aspects of my life, like I've done some scheduling stuff. I've done there's one of my buddies, Craig Ballantyne is his name with a B as in Buzz, has a book called The Perfect Life Formula. And he talks about that stuff. It's like you got to know where you're at, like in a sense of where do you want to be in a year, where do you want to be in 3 years, where do you want to be in 5, what are the actions you have to take to do that. And I know that's not necessarily like a visualization, but you do have to sit down and think about that stuff. Like, where do you want to be in a year? Well, do you want to be on the beach in Mexico? Do you want to be second place in the bodybuilding show or first place or whatever? Like your goal is to be top 5 or whatever. But sitting down, like and like closing your eyes and just seeing that can lead to copious amounts of effects, especially if you want to switch to the reverse on it, in a sense of if you're so negative, in a sense of, I'll never be top 5, I'll never do this. So like you can almost, we'll call it negative visualization, because you're almost picturing yourself in, like, we'll say 10th place, which that could be one of the factors that's causing you to be in 10th place in a sense. So, but the mental imagery itself, I haven't done a heck of a lot of it myself, where I've sat down before a workout and thought about how, like I'm going to actually be doing this set of leg press, or I'm going to be watching my muscles activate, or things for the posing routine. However, I've seen lots of success with it with clients, with others. And for the big sets and stuff, though, for me, it would be more of a routine than it would be the mental imagery. Like, I know they didn't necessarily say visual imagery, but for mental imagery, there was at one point in time when I was wanting to hit my best squat. I remember I was training with one of my clients at the time. And I remember I put on like a song that I really liked, and like I had like I walked to one end of the gym to the other, just like it's almost like when people have like a lucky rabbit's foot type of thing, right? It's like that's in a sense doing that mental imagery. So like it was preparing myself, getting yourself into that the mental space in a sense, right? And anything that kind of does that for you, try it out. Like especially if everything else, if you are especially if you are one of those people that seems to drown in everything, in a sense of you are worrying about your car that's being fixed, you're worrying about your job, and in that you cannot get rid of that at the gym as well. And you find that that's distracting you in some way, shape, or form from your sets or from your workouts or from your posing routine or whatever. Is that some of this stuff, this mental imagery, the visualization stuff can really help with that. It's in a broader aspect, a form of micro meditation, in a sense of like before the set, kind of putting yourself into that zone, right? Like you'll see people on their phones, of course you will, especially now, either texting between sets, and I've been guilty of it too, especially when I was too high volume with clients. And those are usually some of my worst workouts, because I'm not there. My mental state is not there. It's not in the gym. It's not progressing. It's not believing in what I want to believe in a sense. So I think so I'll actually almost take that back, what I said, that I haven't done a heck of a lot of it. So I've done the reverse stuff. Like I haven't been thinking about what I should be thinking about, but then also the times that I have, I've either like, because there was a period in time where I did leave my phone in the office, like when I had an office at the gym and trained there, and actually used like an iPod that had no Wi-Fi, anything like. And I would be willing. I might even start doing that now again, because those are some of my best damn workouts, because there was zero distraction. I would go when it was just kind of me in the gym. There was not a lot of other people there, and so I was able to get into that mental space and have that clarity. So that's my answer: is that the role can be monstrous, especially if you're finding that. A lot of things are clouding your vision or your mental space. Then for sure.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I have a saying. I'm sure it's probably not my saying, but I say it a lot. Something to the extent of, if you can't picture yourself succeeding at something, you won't be able to.
Yeah.
Which I find to be true to an extent. Yeah, obviously, like, you don't want to take that to the point of being delusional with, like, you're
right.
gonna, right. You just, like, I'm going to jump off this building, and if I see myself flying, I'm going to fly type thing, so you don't want to, it's just making it work for you. I know personally, I will use it some with, like, big sets in the gym. But I also would have a routine, like you said, like, that would get me amped up for that set, types of music that I like, just things like that.
Absolutely.
But I think imagery is great. Especially with something like he mentions posing. I think imagery is great for posing, because, you can't see yourself on stage, other than if you practice in a mirror, and, that's only going to take you so far. So yeah, I think it's perfectly fine to do mental imagery, and also some more like, stuff that's a little more vague, like imagining yourself being successful at something that's a lot further off, not standing on stage holding a trophy, imagining yourself being successful at your business, for example. Stuff like that. I think it's great to think about those things, because I think imagery can instill confidence, and confidence can help.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I look at it. As long as the imagery is instilling confidence and not just delusion, then I think it's great. So, okay. So the next one, we got a fun one. Favorite movie of all time.
Oh wow. Okay. You know what's wild is, did you have one right off the top of your head?
No.
Oh, like, damn you, Austin. Like that's the thing. You know what? So, like, a side note about me in movies is, I like, not necessarily a movie buff, but I used to really enjoy watching a lot of movies. It was just kind of I would go through the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, top 100 at the time, and now it's the top 250, and just go through and see the movies. And, like, if someone thought the movie was good, I'd watch it, and then try to watch, really, at one point, a lot of really bad horror movies to see if I could finally make myself scared, but it didn't end up happening. So I'll probably get booed a lot for this answer, because this is thank God it jumped into my head here, but at least in my top 5, if not top 3 movies, is the very first Blair Witch Project. And so why? Because that movie has gotten such stink reviews over the years. It was made by, I don't know if anyone knows, like, I think it came out, I was in grade 7 or grade 8. And I remember my second cousin was down from Ontario at the time when I lived in Nova Scotia, and he took me out. But it was such one of those things that was, funny enough, we're talking about the mental imagery in the last question there. It was one of those that left off with not a definitive ending, and it really made you think, and, like, you kind of, like, created your own ending type of thing to it. If anyone's ever watched it or hasn't watched it, please don't go watch it off of me saying, oh, it's Marty's favorite movie, I better go watch that, and then before I get hate mail. But just how it was done. And so going back to me trying to look at, like, bad horror movies and make myself scared, like, I was young at the time too. I don't know if I was genuinely scared, but it definitely was, like, a thriller in a sense of, like, oh my God, like, that's, like, what did happen? And, like, and I've always loved those what if stories, especially, like, the whole dystopia things, like, that game Fallout. Like, I enjoyed the video game. I don't really play video games a heck of a lot, but, like, alternate, like, timelines and things like that, and, like, that's why I love the Marvel universe. I think that stuff is super, super neat. But yeah, like, depending upon too how I'm even wearing, this is funny we're talking about it, I'm even wearing my Infinity Gauntlet t-shirt here, because I've loved that. That's my favorite comic book story arc, and I really like because what do they call the not the Infinity Gauntlet, they called it something else, the Infinity Wars. And so the second of that movie will be coming out here in another year, so we'll see. That might end up being my favorite movie of all time if they do that well. But I'm gonna go with, sadly, the Blair Witch Project. Have you seen it?
I have seen it.
And you hate it?
No, I remember liking it. Actually, yeah. I like the weird thing is I like movies about witches, which I guess that helps.
There you
to
go.
begin.
Yeah.
I think a witch is, like, one of the creepiest things that you could possibly imagine, because they have the ability to cast spells. Like, it's just, that to me is just that adds a whole new element to it. It's different than like a superhero, you know.
Yes.
Something about it, but oh man, I don't even know. I would probably say probably like depends on what kind of, I could maybe give like a favorite movie in each genre type of thing, just because I'm kind of, depends on what kind of mood I'm in. But I do like some of the stupid mindless comedies. That I would say probably the genre, like the 90s genre with like what would like a National Lampoon type of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that genre, like all those movies. So that kind of gives you an idea of the comedies I like.
Sure.
You know, and that you could add like Chris Farley movies and stuff into that. But man, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have a good answer for it. I enjoy movies from every genre, and the way that I mark a good movie too is something that I could like go back and watch again at some point.
Replay value. Yep.
Yeah. Do you ever think like sometimes you watch a movie and then you think it's really good, and then you go back and watch it the second time and it kind of disappoints you the second time?
Well, the two reigning supreme movies of that all time are by the same guy, are by James Cameron, are both Titanic and then Avatar. Because those are the movies, like, you see them, they were fantastic, but do you really want to go back and watch Titanic all over again? Like I think it had like a really good DVD and VHS release, and same thing with Avatar, but like those were a lot to meet through, a lot to sit through, and like they just weren't, like, I wasn't super interested in like, I don't think I personally rewatched them other than once. I know a couple of my cousins did, but like this is not just my opinion too. A lot of people online said like that was a one and done kind of thing. So I agree with you on that. Like finding the movies that you could watch time and time again, those are the ones that stick in my mind too.
Yeah, lots of movies that are packed with, especially like a comedy, something that's packed with lots of one-liners or things that you might miss on the first time through. Yeah. And you catch it the second time, stuff like that I enjoy. But so sorry, that's a bummer answer. That's the best I could do.
Austin, you let us down on this one, man. That's okay. You don't let us down ever. So we'll let you have a mulligan on this one. That's no problem.
All right. Good deal. I'll try to make it up to you on the next question. Next one is experiences and tips as far as overcoming and managing anxiety, whether it be day-to-day routine or related to training and nutrition.
Okay, so we'll say it's tips on how to manage day-to-day anxiety?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and do this one first, since I sucked at the one.
Yeah, I was going to say, since you sucked, you got to make up for it on this one. You go for it.
So for me, and the people I work with, I think the biggest thing is just finding the source of the anxiety. You know, really finding out the why. I think a lot of people have themselves convinced that they like doing something and they really don't. They like their routines, for example, they like bodybuilding. They like training. They like their nutrition. They enjoy the thought of it and they enjoy what it involves, but they've turned it into something that they don't enjoy. You know, they have themselves convinced that they do. And whether that's like they're too OCD for their own tolerance, like they just, it's driving them nuts, or they're just, micromanaging or whatever it is. And people are going to fall all over the scale here, because depending on what their personality type is and how, what their, probably I would say what their life was like before bodybuilding also makes a difference. But some people are going to be able to handle a lot of that, and they're going to feel perfectly at home being super type A, OCD, micromanaging everything. They have no problems. It doesn't cause them anxiety. They're fine. And other people, they might think that they can do that, but they just can't. They're really doing more harm than good, because they're so stressed about missing a meal, or not, something happens in their day and it throws their schedule off, or just whatever it can be. And to add to that too, learning to be flexible when you need to. You can, I mean, I know even me and you too, I mean, because we both work from home.
Yep.
Primarily. So you would think work from home, and I can give myself as even a more extreme example because I have my gym here too. So, you know, you would think how could your day possibly never be anything but routine, right? Mm-hmm. Because I control everything. But there's still stuff that happens. I still have things I have to go take care of. I still have to make appointments for things sometimes. I mean, it's like, it's not always just cut and dry. So, you know, you have to learn how to be flexible when you need to. And because those are normally the people are comfortable in the routine. It's just when they get thrown out of their routine that there's where your anxiety comes from. It's not, you know, it's typically not like your day-to-day comfort zone doing the same thing. You might have some anxiety there, but the anxiety will rise a lot when you know something out of the ordinary is happening. And it can be anything. It can be like, I'll give you an example. You normally eat at 9 a.m. and you have a doctor's appointment at 9 a.m. Mm-hmm. That sounds so silly, but people that are so routine, they're like, damn, should I eat at 8:30? Or is that going to mess my day up because I'm going to be really hungry about my next meal? Or should I, but what if I don't eat before and the doctor's appointment runs really long? And, yep. You know, and it's like, it sounds ridiculous, right? But those are things that, you know, people that live this kind of lifestyle and in the routine are going to deal with. And that was a really easy example. I mean, there could be more extreme examples, like, you know, something comes up unexpected, but yeah, so just learning ways to not only mentally be flexible when you have to, but also how to physically be flexible. Like, hey, if you have to combine 2 meals during the day, it's not the end of the world. Or if you have to, you know, finish your meals at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. Or heaven forbid you missed a meal, it's, you know, you're going to learn that it's not the end of the world because your stress reduction is going to play a bigger part than that meal, more than likely. So, yeah, learning to be flexible when you have to. As far as like training goes, I don't know if it's, I mean, full transparency, like I get anxiety before training at times, mm-hmm. Definitely, just because the training's hard.
That's right.
You know, it's like, and that's just because I'm pushing myself to a certain point where it is very uncomfortable and it is nerve-wracking. You know, it's like, oh, I'm at that top set, like I'm going to unrack this weight and it feels like I'm not going to be able to come back up with it. Yeah. But yeah, that's a feeling I think everyone's going to experience. I think some stuff like some learning how to control parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. If you do find that you're real anxious before training, just because you're either excited about it or you're just nervous because it's going to be really hard, then stay calm. Don't you know, don't blow your whole wad before you even walk into the gym. You know, you don't have to roll up to the gym playing your death metal in the car, banging your head on the steering wheel. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm kind of a person, I like that stuff. I like the hype up. That's something I really enjoy. But I've also learned that I can't just do that the whole workout because I'm just gonna be an anxious, stressed mess and destroy myself. Yes. And so it can be simple stuff. Roll up to the gym, listen to some jazz music, something. You know, I literally have stations. It's hilarious. I posted this on my story one day where I have Pandora and it had my listen, like the order that I listened to it in. So it went like jazz, which was probably when I was warming up and going through my lighter set, and then it worked up to like rap, and then into like Cannibal Corpse at the end.
I used to listen to them. I remember them. I used to listen to them. That's hilarious.
Yeah, so it was a hilarious progression. But my point is that, you know, you do want to enter the gym in a calm environment, look at training in a calm way. If you want to do your visualization like we talked about earlier, that stuff's great. But I find that you just don't want to be, from a nervous system standpoint and a stress and anxiety standpoint, try not to be overly amped up before you even hit the weights.
Yep. No, exactly. Yep. That's a very good angle on it too, because like it's Because where I'll go with this too, because I am a pretty damn big proponent, and I think I have to be, especially in the business that we're in terms of not only bodybuilding, contest prep, but coaching. I'm a big proponent of mental health. You have to be. I've always said from as long as I can remember that the mental and the emotional will lead the physical. Very, very rarely will the physical lead the mental or the emotional. It can sometimes, like as in if you've had we'll say a quote unquote down day, can you looking good bring you back up? Sure. Like as in you're like, oh, you know what? Reminding yourself about the progress, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. But more often than not, the mental will completely affect the physical in a sense of I know people that have been not only the same weight or look the same, look in the mirror and thought they look like crap, but then when they're in a better mental state, looked exactly the same, looked in the mirror and thought they looked great. So that's just how much the mental can affect the physical in a sense. But so I'll kind of give kind of my take on this because I've had quite a bit of recent experience. When I say recent, about the last year and a half on this, is learning about what exactly is anxiety. Because welcome to, well, now we can say 2019 in a sense of everyone either has something to do with mental health going on with them. And disclaimer, that is not to take away any of this. I'm not saying that you don't have anxiety. I'm not saying you don't have depression. I'm not saying you don't potentially have ADHD or OCD or something, but it's getting blown out of proportion to the sense now where it's almost like you Google a health symptom, but before you know it, you have AIDS. Or you have cancer because Google, you have a headache. Now you've got cancer. It's like, oh my God, right? So where I'm going with this is that do you have anxiety? Like how do you know that you have this? Because you have felt something, or someone has told you something, or Google told you something. Have you been clinically tested by either a psychiatrist or something like that? So that's something to take into consider. So and then what I had to do was really educate myself on it, and some of the things that I kind of and this helped me when I had the education behind anxiety. That was monumental in my ability to manage it, because then you can see what your signs are and what your triggers are, what your physical symptoms are, in a sense of one of the girls I know, she will start biting the bottom left corner of her lip. And when she knows that she's doing this, that's cluing her in. Holy crap, my anxiety's starting to get out of control. And then you can not only start using tips and things like that, such as removing yourself from the situation, if you can. If you can't, being able to breathe. I'm telling you, breathing, and it's not a hocus pocus meditation thing, but the simplest form of meditation is breathing. And because why is that? Because if you breathe and you breathe not obnoxious, especially not if you're in a crowd, but if you're semi alone or even just in a line and you just and not the big whole deep breath in, deep breath out, but if you start breathing audibly through your nose, not through your mouth if you can, unless you're stuffed up or something, but if you start breathing through your nose, you can hear it, and then if you focus on that, that'll bring you right to the moment. And that's something that I would like to drone on more and more about at one point is people are calling it mindfulness. I like to call it being present or something like that. But if you do breathe through your nose and you hear it, that'll bring you right back to that moment. And so you won't be anxious. So the definitions of anxiety and depression, I won't give you the ones that Webster or Google will give you, but I will say that if you look at the word anxiety and you flip the letters around, this is just one of those cool things that I don't know if I don't think the English language plan on doing this at all. But if you rearrange the letters in anxiety, you get you can spell any exit, because that's what anxiety is. You do not want to be in this exact situation, and you're either thinking about being out of it, you are making yourself nervous and of course anxious about that, or you're trying to envision yourself doing anything else. It's like, for instance, you are in the gym and you know that your daughter's in the hospital. You are going to be anxious thinking about your daughter in the hospital, and therefore that is taking you away from the moment present being in the gym. And that, of course, is going to affect your workouts. And this is not going to guarantee what the person is asking about, but this is how to manage that stuff, right? So breathing is huge for that, because that will bring you right back there. It's not going to take away those thoughts, but it can really help. There's been times where I've got worked up or worried about a client, worried about myself, worried about something. Let's say we want to go take a trip an hour south and it's snowing and it's blizzarding and that's worrying you. Start breathing. I'm telling you, that's that's probably one of the bigger tips I can get. But so the definitions that, or sort of not the definitions, but kind of the tips I wanted to say about depression and anxiety. I know the question wasn't about depression, but depression and how severe it is when you start living or thinking or being too much in the past, because you can't be depressed about stuff in the future. That's anxious. So then anxiety is the future. You are either worrying, living, or being too much in the future. That's it. So depression's the past. Anxiety is the future. I can firmly tell you, I know I say that a lot, that at various points, especially 3-4 years ago, is that I inadvertently would make it a point to say, I don't know what anxiety is. I've never felt it. And I don't know why I had to tell people that, because I had it and I had it bad, especially social anxiety, which is funny as shit for me to think about, because when I was back in my really early 20s or even 19, 20, and I was partying in a sense of I was boozing a lot. I was going out to dance clubs, talking to girls, and all this stuff. Is that I loved it. I loved being the center of attention. I was the lead singer and guitar player in a band. I did musical theater. I loved singing in front of people, and but then as I got older, not only did I develop the social anxiety, but I probably had it then. I just didn't really know that that's what it was, because there's something called anxious energy or nervous energy. Is that you can perform at a very high level with anxious energy, because if like let's for instance the classic example is, let's go back to the whole daughter being in the hospital thing, and you're worrying about it. Your place might be spotless, because that's how you deal with your anxieties. You start cleaning, and you've got all this energy, and you start cleaning because your brain will not let you sleep. Because I know that you've heard this time and time again on people's assessments, is that they're like, my brain won't let me sleep. I was up thinking about things and whatever, and they'll either lay in bed, which is usually like that's a tip too, is if you are in bed at nighttime and you're anxious and you have racing thoughts and you're not able to sleep, get up and do something. Don't remain in bed, because then your body is going to start associating, your brain is going to start associating being in bed with being alert and being up. So get up and do something. Preferred like not something like watch TV. You could do something productive, but like for me, it's cleaning. Like I know that a lot of people actually, the cleaning is kind of their thing. Anyways, it could be that, it could be organizing, it could be anything, picking that. So finding a way to kind of harness that energy. I know the question was tips on how to manage day-to-day anxiety, but that could be it. That could be one there too. So I had no idea I had it, especially the social. So for me, one of the triggers was I would, especially when I was younger, I would bite my nails. And it was like one of those terrible, disgusting habits that a lot of people don't break. And I didn't know that's what it was. Is because I was anxious. I was trying to control the situation, because when I play with my hand or I bite my nails or whatever, I can control that. A lot of people, what do? They go smoke, because when they smoke a cigarette, they are now in control of that situation. It gives them time to think or whatever. You pick it, right? There's a form of I know I'm not recommending this as a form of meditation, but when people go outside for a smoke and they're by themselves or whatever, that's time for them to start sorting through things inside of their head. So there's a kind of a little tidbit if you didn't know about that. So for mine, it's a situational one. It would be a social anxiety. If you know, like meeting up with a certain person is going to give you anxiety. Like we just said Christmas here, so people can associate that with a lot of anxiety too. Like so, being prepared, like as Austin said, as much as you can, is like routing things out. We're never going to be able to be a completely OCD and completely routine, as like I'm not going to cover, because Austin already mentioned that perfectly. But like controlling what you can, and then I know this is one of those really big statements. Like, oh sure, Marty, that's really easy for you to say. Is don't try to control the things that you don't have control over, such as the weather. Like, you know, if you're trying to do that super much, like that's not only a waste of your energy, but recognizing that that's what you're doing, that you're not only thinking about things that are out of your control, but you are trying to control them. That's going to lead you down obviously a pretty poor path in that regard. But then the other questions too that I would ask myself outside of the is it clinical is like, do you actually need medication for this? I have a wonderful friend who is in law school now, and she had pretty darn crippling anxiety. And I will tell you, now that she has on the correct dosage and proper medication, it's been succumb a lot. Because so the question to go along with do you need meds is like, is it chemical or is it situational? Like, is it a social situation? Is it around family? Is it in the gym? Are you nervous about something? So is it situational? And then are you creating it too? Like, are you making yourself nervous or anxious? Are you the one that's like the thoughts are stacking on top of each other, aka you're now worried about the weather, which means you're going to worry about your friends driving there as well, including you driving there, and then worrying about parking, because are you going to get there on time? Are you going to miss the event? And they can just stack, and recognizing this and being able to just slow down, focus on something that is like more positive. I know that's easier said than done, one of those things. And then the last thing a tip I will give is it relationships? Is a friend always making you anxious? Is a club always making you anxious, in the sense of maybe you go play bowling with a group of people, but they make you anxious? Maybe changing the bowling team. I know it sounds silly, but that could be it. Maybe it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Maybe they make you anxious as shit too. That's going to be something you can either talk to them about or look into. I'm not going to give you relationship advice. Take a look at our relationship podcast. That was one of my favorite ones that we did. But like, yeah, is it in relation? Is it your family? Is it this? And recognizing those situations can be the tipping point to being able to even be able to manage that. Because if you don't know what's making you anxious, like me, that's hell. And I'll tell you, like, I regret not looking into it sooner, not like studying about it. There's plenty of good, off the top of my head, I'll put them in the show notes if I can, but there's plenty of good resources about learning about anxiety. And being able to, be like, we'll say more self-aware, because that would be the biggest tip to manage day-to-day stuff, is being self-aware about what actually makes you anxious, what triggers you into, we'll call it anxiety mode. So I know that was long-winded and a little bit different from Austin's response, but that's what I have to say on that one.
Yeah, that's great. I like your example of depression's in the past and anxiety is in the future. I'm sure you know the book, The Power of Now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, something like that. It's a great read. I actually read that at one point. I mean, it was years back, but I found that whole premise super helpful.
Yeah.
So
it's going on that, like, really quickly. Sorry, there. It was like, so the power of now is probably that's like men's health of the we'll call it the presence or the meditation world, in terms of, or like, not the meditation, sorry, the presence or the mindfulness world. Like that was the big first one. So how Eckhart Tolle, the guy that wrote The Power of Now, came into be was he was on Oprah's book club. I think it was like 98 or something. So this was the world's first big exposure to this. And I can guarantee you, and I mean that, guarantee you, that he would have been not even remotely close to as successful if Oprah not only believed in that, but promoted it, right? And put it to the book club, gave a bunch free, whatever, gave him the promotion. But so that's the entry level book. It might not resonate with a lot of people, especially, like, funny enough, I saw him here live about last May. He came here to Calgary, and I went to watch him talk, and he talked about his different books. He talked about The Power of Now. He talked about A New Earth or A New Planet, whatever it is, the one talking about the ego, which I couldn't recommend possibly more, because basically it's all about humility and how the ego and everything else. But if anyone wants to dive into the mind, we'll say, rabbit hole, that's a start. And then anyone can message me or Austin too. We can give you resources on that stuff. But that kind of stuff in that world, like, and we won't get too far out to lunch on the spirituality or whatever, but that has, I would say, so significantly altered my life in such a damn positive way that I wish I had started studying that before, like 30-31. Because, like, yeah, like that book was an intro into it. I actually didn't read that one first. I read a different one first. But, like, that's great that you mentioned that book. That's perfect.
Yeah, I know when I read it, I got so deep into the topic. Like, I was studying like spirituality and the monks and their practices with breathing, and that's when I learned all about soft belly breathing and learning how to execute that stuff. So the breathing's another great example. And from a sciencey standpoint, I don't know that the monks know this because it's a spiritual thing, but the whole parasympathetic nervous system activation, you can achieve that just through breathing.
Yes.
You can bring yourself back. Like, I talk about that soft belly breathing. It's super easy. You don't have to go to a therapist. You can do it you can do it in your car. You can do it anywhere. It takes you 10 seconds, and you can literally feel yourself come back to the present and calm down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome. That was a good question. Okay, so we're getting up on time here, guys. So we'll just go ahead and hit one more real quick, and make sure we get to the other ones next time, or I can get them on my Q&A or something. So
sure.
The remaining question is my client, so he can live with it.
That's right. There you go.
I can talk to him off air. All right. So last one is about off-season calorie increases. It states, another chat window pop up. Got to get rid of that. So it says, during the off-season, while adding in calories, what would you consider an aggressive and conservative way of adding in food to a client's diet, like in terms of grams?
Ooh.
Oh, well, we talked a lot about this on the reverse dieting episode.
Yes.
The biggest thing, the biggest factor here is just going to be how quickly does a person adapt to those changes. If you have somebody that, and this is going to be especially when they're leaner and they're working their calories up, not as much later on when they've kind of hit that metabolic ceiling. But, if you have somebody that's every change, you're only adding in, I'll give you something small, like you're adding in like 10 grams of carbs every time, and they just keep adapting to it, you're probably wasting your time. It's going to take a while before you even find that surplus. So that might be an instance where you do it a couple times. You're like, all right, you're adapting to it. You're not gaining any weight. You're not gaining any fullness. Nothing's really happening. Let's make the increase larger. And that would be an instance again where you're just trying to out eat your metabolism, if you will. So, and then you might have people that they're just not adaptable at all. They don't hardly adapt, and you can make smaller increases, because in reality, you don't need to be in a huge, massive surplus. You just need to be a little over maintenance, so you have some building materials to work with. You don't have to. People are saying, I'm going to eat big to get big. It's like, well, you only really, you're only going to want to out eat your metabolism by so much, or you're just going to be fat.
Yeah.
You're only you're only going to build muscle so fast. You're only going to utilize so many raw, so much of those amino acids and carbs and fats. So if you're just ridiculously high over your actual maintenance calories, I mean, you're going to imagine that you're going to partition a lot of that to your adipose. So, yeah. So it just depends on how adaptable the person is. I couldn't really give you aggressive in grams. Like, I mean, I have some people that they can get away with those small increases. I'll add a little bit of fat, 5-10 grams here and there if I need to, or add, 10-15 carbs in here and there. And that works for them. That's enough. Yep. And then other people, that doesn't do anything. And they just have so much adaptability and metabolic flexibility that nothing happens. So I might have to do a bigger increase of, 50 carbs or something, you know what I mean? So it just depends.
Yeah. And I'll start out my answer with the same thing. It depends. Like, I agree with what you said. Of course, it's, so it's like, exactly. Like, and and this is by no means any offense to the person that asked the question, but these are some of the questions that I dislike, in a sense of asking for direct amounts of anything, like direct grams, like how much should I weigh on stage? How much, what's the exact amount of time of cardio I should do per week or whatever? Like, and that's it. It depends, right? So, especially if we want to look at like what a bikini girl would call an aggressive or conservative increase for the off season versus a super heavyweight bodybuilder that's enhanced, it's going to be different, of course. And I know that the person's not asking for both of the answers there, but like, depending upon where you're like, so the best way to figure out this question, especially if you're wanting to know how much do I increase my calories in grams in the off season, would be, what have you done in the past? Like, the documentation is so friggin' huge, in a sense of if you've topped out, let's say you're off season and you're a bikini girl, you've topped out at 2,200 calories. Like, and someone might laugh at that and say, like, that doesn't seem like very much, but like, I know I have plenty of bikini girls that would get fat off of 2,200 calories, and they don't have an impaired metabolism or any of this junk. That's just where they're at, and you see that still around, not quite as much anymore, thank gosh, but about 5 years ago, there was this huge, not only anti-cardio movement, but like, you should be able to build your metabolism up to the point of eating all this whopping amount of food. There, people were bragging about like their caloric intake, and I'm talking women along with men too. But later it was like women like, I'm eating 3, and that was like a sales tactic too. I know this is going a little bit off topic, but people would be like, yeah, like my bikini girls are eating 300 grams of carbs and 50 fat. If you're not doing that, you need to hire me. And that's not it. Like, that's super cool if genetic wonder Bella was able to do this, but if non-genetic wonder Alice can only eat 160 grams of carbs in her off season, or she gets visible adipose tissue cured very easily. Well, come on now. Like, so those are things to watch out for, especially if you are Googling this question and you're finding various answers on this. Like someone saying, like Austin said, you could put 5 to 10 grams of fat in someone's diet and they'll start gaining muscle tissue in the right way. Or someone might need 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrates as an increase, and that could be viable. Or let's put it this way: maybe you say you add in the 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrates and nothing happens. So they adapted that fast, or they're not at where they should be at all. And as a very quick side note, we've probably already talked about this, but you cannot actually build your metabolism. I don't want to. I know, right? I thank gosh you laughed at that one because you can't. Like, so everyone talks about this building your metabolism in the off season. So people go, okay, then Marty and Austin, how come I can eat 3,000 calories this off season versus 2,700 last off season? Well, probably because you have not only more muscle, but you're probably training either harder or better or using more weight, so therefore you're burning more calories. But no, the metabolism cannot be trained in a sense of it cannot be built up. It cannot go above and beyond where it's set. Your body is your body. Your genetics are your genetics unless you alter it some way, either by being enhanced or some kind of other pharmaceutical means or something like that. Like, no, it just doesn't happen that way. So that's why that documentation, like I said, if you got to that, I'll use my 2,200 calorie remark. If you were starting your last prep at 2,200 calories as a bikini girl, and this year you're only at 2,000 calories and you're around the same time, that might be the time to not make, like, especially if you're at that 2,000 calorie mark and you are gaining significant body fat at that, still hang out there. Like, don't jump up to that 2,200 calorie mark just because you did it. And I know that the question here was the aggressive and conservative. Is like, if you wanted to jump right up to that, like, yeah, go back and listen to the reverse dieting podcast. Sorry, I'll interject there because I think we covered the hell out of that topic in a really damn good manner in terms of what's aggressive in terms of a time frame after a show and things like that. But if we're talking about you haven't done a show and you're just in off season and you're stuck or whatever, it's that evaluation. Like, if anyone hasn't kind of figured out now, my theme is always going to be dissecting this with a scalpel, in a sense of being analytical about it. In other words, why do you want to be aggressive with this? Why would you want to be conservative with this, right? Like, you don't need to become a fat blob to become strong. You don't need to pump up to 5,000 calories. Like Austin said, you don't need to eat big to get big just because that's what you've heard, which you'll still see that. I'll still see the gym bros or even other people put that up on their Facebook or their Instagram. Got to eat big to get big. It'll be a picture of them eating 3 cups of brown rice with their steak, whatever. But it's like, if you want to get there quickly, in a sense, and that's the whole point behind your aggressive tactic, just know that you are probably going to put on some extra body fat. And do you need to do that? No, but like if I have to take it from one slight bit different angle, is that if break it down to men and women again, is that I would always want women to be a little bit more aggressive than what I see them do on their own. In a sense of coaching, like I'll see if, let's say, I give that, I've done this. I've given, let's say, 160 grams of carbs with whatever 40, whatever fat you pick, it doesn't matter. And women will look at this and they'll get terrified, and they'll say, "That's so many carbs." And I'll go, "Okay, cool." Or conversely, thanks to that movement a little while ago, I'll see some women look at that and go, "That's it," which is mind blowing. But in general, I don't think women will give themselves enough food in grams to facilitate that growth, and then they'll show up the next year, especially if we're talking about a competitor, they'll show up the next year in the same spot because they weren't aggressive enough. So this is just a blanket statement of what I've seen in general. And then for men, I would almost ask them to be a little bit more conservative, because, the whole cheat meal every week, bro, or cheat meal twice a week, bro, and before you know it, they're blown way over where they should be. Their fat levels are monstrous because they were too aggressive. So as another blanket statement, I would like to see that toned back ever so slightly. So yeah, in terms of like grams again, like if men are, or if you're putting up your calories, or sorry, your grams by like 50 grams of carbs, and that you don't, I don't even know how you define aggressive and conservative here, Austin. Like, just what a tough question in a sense, right? Like, what's aggressive and conservative? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I say you make good points though. You can. It's just. And there's like points where it can change within within like, high stress periods, what happens to, outside variables, like did your NEAT levels change? I mean, there's just a lot of little things, but the whole metabolism thing's hysterical. Like it's like, they built your metabolism up to the capacity that it should have been at previously. Just because your old coach didn't do that doesn't mean that that you've all of a sudden magically gotten a new metabolism. No, it's like your ceiling is your ceiling. It's just that you were never at your ceiling before.
Exactly. Either that or you weren't trained. Like maybe last off season you were training 4 times a week for 30 minutes, and now you're training 6 times a week for an hour. Like that's not metabolism. That's energy output. That's direct exercise output. Now let's say you're now at a job that you're on your feet versus before you were an accountant. So that's such a shit marketing tactic like that or promotional tactic that coaches will persuade people into. So just like, I know that wasn't the question, but again, don't fall into that trap, please.
Yep. Yeah. Unless you have some like medical thing, like, your thyroid, like when I got my thyroid fixed here recently. Mm-hmm. The amount of food that I had to eat was ridiculous.
Yeah. That'll screw you up.
I mean, and I've eaten a lot before, but it was even a little more than that. I'm just like, this sucks. Mm-hmm. So much. So, yeah, it's a good question, but again, kind of hard to answer. It's gonna change per person, per year, per situation.
Yep. And that's it. Like, so, and if anyone's ever going to ask a question to myself or Austin looking for like a direct answer, and in a sense of like, especially if you're not a client or whatever, but even with info, like a sense of, I'm at 2,000 calories. What do you think I should do? Jump 20 grams of carbs or 50 grams of carbs? I've kind of stalled. It's like, we can't really give that answer. You know what I mean? Like it all depends. Like it's experiment. Try it out. Tried 50 and you went up 4 pounds in a week. Probably tone it back, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's coaching. That's not Q&A.
There you go. That's my boy.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Like I said, we do have one more, but it's my client, good friend of mine, so I'll make sure he gets taken care of.
Sure. Yep. That works for me. Well then, from myself and Austin here at the Mind Body Broadcast, thanks for your questions, and we will catch you next episode.